With the latest agriculture news from across the state and nation, it's time for the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. Here's your host, Sabrina Halvorson.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us this morning, this Friday morning on the AgNet News Hour. I am Sabrina Halvorson here with Lorrie Boyer. Morning, Lorrie.
And good Friday morning.
So we're going to talk today about the confirmation hearings. There's a lot going on with our federal government at the moment, getting new people into office, new secretaries into the president's cabinet. One of those most important for agriculture would be the agriculture secretary, of course. And so we've been talking quite a bit about Brooke Rollins. She had her confirmation hearing with the Senate Ag Committee several days ago. And so we've been kind of talking about it. We have a little bit of audio that we can share on some of her viewpoints on some topics. And I thought, Lori, that we would start out this morning with trade. So she's answering a question from Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado. And he asked her about trade. And let's hear what she has to say.
About what the trade policies are going to be of this administration and of the country.
Thank you, Senator Bennett, of course, and loved our conversation about your beautiful Colorado.
Thank you. Come back anytime, or come anytime.
I would welcome that. We do spend some time there in the summers, as good Texans do, getting out of the heat, but I'll look forward to seeing you next time. In the last handful of years, we've gone from not having a trade deficit in our agricultural communities to having a $45 billion trade deficit. Of course, that has led to many challenges, including food inflation. And I know when I've heard President Trump talk about his priorities, the first is the border, which I'm guessing we'll get into at some point. But second was food inflation. And so there are many tools in our toolkit, both through USDA and expanding markets, which are all intertwined, to begin immediately to work to bring that deficit down and hopefully soon get it to zero. My commitment is
I would say,
yes, sir.
That deficit we know is being caused by a strong dollar. It's being caused by competition from Brazil. It's being caused by limitations on our beef supply. It's being caused by prices that are going up. I mean, these are. I don't think these particularly are failures in trade policy. It's making it harder for us to export, which is what Senator McConnell's concern was, which I share. And I think that all of us understand, and actually I will say there are many ways in which I'm sympathetic to some of the trade policies that President Trump is trying to advocate for, but agriculture is already in a tough spot for those reasons, I think, largely, and we don't want it to be in a tougher spot as a result of what happens here. And I think, when you were in my office, you talked a little bit, and this is going to be the easiest question that you get, but I hope you only take 15 seconds to answer so I can go on to the next stuff.
Yes, sir.
Which is, what is your responsibility as the Secretary of Agriculture to go into the Oval Office and say you haven't thought through the unintended consequences that are going to flow to American agriculture if you pursue these trade policies?
Senator, in 15 seconds, my role is to defend, to honor, to elevate our entire agriculture community in the Oval Office, around the table, through the interagency process, and to ensure that every decision that is made in the coming 4 years has that front of mind as those decisions are being made.
Okay, and I agree also with what Senator Klobuchar said, is that what we've heard from our farmers and ranchers over and over again is they want to be able to do the work, they want to be able to export, they don't want to solve this problem by getting aid to make up for what they should have been able to send to Asia and other kinds of places. The only growth that my farmers and ranchers can see in the foreseeable future, which is to say their lifetimes, is by growing our exports of agriculture.
And then they go on to talk about a few other things, but we get some ideas of her perspective on trade there. And the interesting thoughts, and I appreciated that he asked, what do you do if there's something that you need to go into the Oval Office and tell the president, I don't think you've thought this through on how this will affect agriculture. I thought her answer to that was very good.
I did too. And I liked all the words and I liked the question. I just feel like there just wasn't a lot of meat in that. It was all superficial. I think every ag secretary and every lawmaker has said those same words over the years. So less talk and more walk, to me, let's get into this and let's really get these trade deals going. And, to Vilsack's credit, I think that he probably would have been a little bit more aggressive in trade deals during his term last time with Joe Biden. Had the Biden administration been more supportive, more aggressive, more assertive on getting trade deals done. We heard over and over so many times about needing more trade and more trade deals and access, but the hands were tied a lot of times. And that's not the fault of the trade ambassadors and USDA. That was more of an administration thing. Now, while I don't know all the details, I wasn't sitting in those meetings or in the Oval Office. I'm not sure what all the reasoning was, but hopefully this time around, we can put more action into place and let Rollins and let the USDA, let the trade departments do their job and really get in there and open those markets, because they're both absolutely right. Senator Bennett is absolutely right. I mean, we really need to get some trade going in order to help producers with some of these prices and some of the farm gate things that are going on out there right now.
Yeah, you bring up so many good points, and you're absolutely right. The Biden administration did not have a focus on agricultural trade. I agree with you. I think that former Secretary Tom Vilsack would have been stronger on making trade deals if he had been more able to. So we also have a little bit of audio about some issues specific to California and trade. We're going to hear that. We do need to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll talk about that. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. She's Lorrie Boyer. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. We are talking about the confirmation hearing for President Trump's pick for Ag Secretary, Brooke Rollins. And we were talking about trade before the break. So during that confirmation hearing that she had with the Senate Ag Committee, Senator Adam Schiff of California also asked her about trade specific to California. And this goes back to during the previous Trump administration, that when the trade wars happened, and agriculture was a loser in those trade wars. However, they did give payments to farmers to make up for some of the lost income because of the trade wars. However, California farmers did not get proportionately what Midwestern farmers, so our specialty crop growers, did not get what our soybean and corn growers were getting. And so Senator Adam Schiff of California asked her about that. And here is the audio of that question.
During the president's first term, USDA had to allocate tens of billions of dollars to offset the financial impact of the tariffs and the reciprocal tariffs that other countries imposed on our agriculture and on our farmers. But that financial assistance offered to farmers impacted by the trade war was not equally distributed. Despite California's leading role in U.S. agriculture and the heavy tariffs imposed on specialty crop exports, California growers receive far less than their fair share in tariff assistance under the 2019 Market Facilitation Program. Out of hundreds of specialty crops grown in the U.S., only 8 crops received direct assistance. And in the end, approximately 1% of the nearly $15 billion in USDA allocated resources went to California specialty crop growers, so about 1%. And as you know, we're the leading state when it comes to specialty crops. If confirmed, are you committed to distributing all economic assistance, including trade relief, to states without regard for their political leanings?
I am committed to that. I think Senator Slotkin, even you and I discussed the specialty crops in Michigan when we met. I look forward to, I'm not familiar with the data that you laid out, but I look forward to learning more about that and being committed to ensuring that to the very, very best of our ability that this is appropriately adjudicated.
So again, not a lot of meat in that response either. It was another of, I will learn more about it and then figure it out kind of answer. But I do have to say I appreciate Senator Schiff bringing up the point, because his facts were accurate.
I am not familiar with that either, that happened. Do you happen to know, or do you have any information on why the payments were so skewed the way they were?
I don't know exactly why they were. That would be something that we'd have to research more. But I think it has to do with just the crops involved, for one thing. You know, the corn and soybeans are such big crops and have such a big presence that they historically overshadow our specialty crops.
Well, and as Schiff pointed out, I'm sure there's political stuff at play. There always
Yeah.
is. And so that was what I think that was part of his implication there as well. But yeah, that is interesting. I did not realize that, to be honest with you.
Yes, yes. So, and and as he also pointed out, our specialty crop producers face a lot of other trade barriers too that they're constantly fighting. So when there is a trade war, it makes it even more difficult for our producers to be able to do business like they need to do. With just the additional regulations when you're dealing with these types of products versus feed products and things like that. There are a lot of differences and they need to be handled differently with special consideration. And, even given the fact that there wasn't even specialty crops included in the farm bill until the last two or three farm bills, can kind of continues along that theme that sometimes we're forgotten and left out. And it's important that the Ag Secretary acknowledges how important specialty crops are to our nation.
And you're right. And we saw that exactly here this last year when specialty crops were added into some of the emergency assistance programs through the Farm Service Agency that hadn't been
Right.
passed. Yeah.
Right. They weren't. And also for the longest time, we had no type of crop insurance for many of our specialty crops. Some still don't, just because of the types of crops that they are. So, again, making sure that as an ag secretary, especially one from Texas, which is not necessarily a specialty crop state, understands the needs of specialty crops. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Also, Rollins says, and I don't have a lot of information, but I want to put it in here. I feel like it's important to add in. She is going to be working on the California Proposition 12. She is acknowledging that. She has brought it up. She's been quoted as saying that she will help fight California's Proposition 12. Now, here, what's interesting to me, and we don't have to go too far into the weeds on this, but it was a voter backed or voted approved initiative. So this goes back to our whole conversation that we had here in the last couple of days on how far does the federal government get into state and even regional and local issues. So I thought that it was interesting that she said that. And I'm like, okay, how does that work? I mean, she can endorse and encourage and have her opinion, but how far does she get into that? And what are the logistics behind that?
Yeah, the whole Prop 12 is a whole another issue entirely because while I understand it makes it hard for hog producers in Iowa, our California voters voted on it, and I don't think that they should have their votes disqualified. So, yeah, that's a whole nother topic. Unfortunately, we do have to head to a break, so we'll have to put the topic on pause. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. She's Lorrie Boyer. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halvorson.
We were chatting this morning, Lorrie and I are chatting about the confirmation hearing for the president's pick for Ag Secretary, Brooke Rollins. She had a confirmation hearing with the Senate Ag Committee a few days ago. And so we're just going over some of her responses to some of the questions and things that were asked for her. Just before the break, we were talking about Prop 12, which has been very contentious around the entire nation. Outside of California, farmers are upset that voters in California can determine how they want their meat produced. And that has caused some issues within primarily within the pork industry because that's what it was targeted on. Prop 12 says, determines that hog production the hogs have to be housed in a certain manner that voters in California thought was more humane. And so that has been a problem around the nation because hog farmers are not wanting to change how they're producing their hogs. And so we brought up the point before the break of, Rollins says that she's going to work on that to change that. And then, I will take the blame on this. I brought up the thought that our California voters risk having their votes disqualified because some farmers in other states don't like them. And it's become a very political issue, again, kind of running off party lines, California being the liberal state that it is, having humane rules and regulations, and farmers not liking that from other parts of the state of the nation. So it is a contentious issue here in the state, and it's one to watch because, like you pointed out, Lorrie, how far does the federal government get to go in that conversation? So, and that has always been from the beginning of this Prop 12. In fact, going back to the egg proposition, Prop 1A, which was 10 years ago or so, going back to that, where California voters determined how they want hens to be treated, and that put on some legal regulations for people selling eggs around the state. Well, now it's the same thing with pigs. Brings in the question that can the voters in one state determine what regulations producers in other states have to follow? It is a truly interesting question.
Yeah, we won't get to know the answer to that for quite a while, I don't think. This is going to be an ongoing discussion, and I think it's going to happen in other industries as well. And sooner or later, we'll see something on it. But as of right now, yeah, it just remains out there.
So while we are talking about hot topics and what's the phrase, hot button issues. So we're now going to talk about immigration and deportations, and this was something else that came up a few times during the confirmation hearing. And this is Senator Richard Durbin of Illinois, who is asking Brooke Rollins about this issue. We'll listen to this audio, and it's a little bit long. We'll listen to the audio, and then we'll just discuss it.
We talked about a lot of things yesterday, and I want to talk about one that's in the headlines this morning and will be for a long time: the mass deportation of undocumented people from the United States. I mentioned to you that I have been surprised by the response I received among farmers and ranchers and people involved in agriculture when it comes to the immigration issue. I told you about the dairy farmer who said, "Senator Durbin, we're going to close down our dairy operation after 3 generations in our family because we need immigrant workers for dairy operations in Illinois." Another young lady with the Farm Bureau raised her hand and said, "While you're at it, include the orchards. Who's going to pick this crop? It isn't the local kids at the high school. They won't even man the fruit stand out by the highway, and I put an air conditioner in there. I can't get them to come to work for me. I need immigrant workers." Turns out that 40% of the farm workers in this country are undocumented. And you know what that means. They're vulnerable to being deported. And if they're deported, what are the farmers going to do? For a lot of them and for a lot of different industries, immigration is critical. Now, your organization has said some pretty strong things. Your American First Policy Institute, they've called for deportation at a scale that actually matters and massive deportation efforts. So I just need to ask you, what is your policy on immigration? We've got to get down to the real world, not the criminals. We don't want them. They shouldn't come here and they shouldn't stay. But those who work every single darn day to pick a crop that American people are not going to pick themselves. And most of them, 40% are undocumented. So can we expect this administration to be raiding farms and going after the immigrant farm workers?
Senator, thank you. And I really was grateful for our time yesterday and our time working together in the last administration. And I appreciate your kindness. I was a little late yesterday. There was some confusion and you gave me a little grace. So I really appreciate that. Yes, Senator Lujan, you as well. Listen, the president's vision of a secure border and a mass deportation at a scale that matters is something I support. I was his domestic policy director in the last White House. I have built and led an organization alongside Chad Wolf, our former Secretary of Homeland Security, at the America First Policy Institute. I want to be extremely transparent, and I think that you deserve that. That is my commitment, is to help President Trump deploy his agenda in an effective way, while at the same time defending, as if confirmed, Secretary of Agriculture, our farmers and ranchers across this country. And so having both of those, which you may argue is in conflict, but having both of those as key priorities, my job is to work with, if confirmed, the Secretary of Labor, Lorrie Chavez-DeRemer from Oregon, but she herself has family farms in California and Oregon, to work with her on the H-2A program, to also work with all of you to reform and and perhaps modernize that H-2A program. We'll also say that the president has been very clear that this first round will be aimed at, as you mentioned, those who have committed crimes and are criminals while inside our borders over the last 4 years. So we will follow the data. We will follow and listen to our farmers and ranchers as this is moving. And my commitment is to work with all of you to work to solve and do everything we can to make sure that none of these farms or dairy producers are put out of business.
Now, I support your answer. Dangerous people shouldn't be here, and if they're here, they should be gone, period. But when we're talking massive deportation, we're gone beyond dangerous criminals. And I just wonder if we ought to give fair warning to farmers and ranchers across America that if you have immigrant labor, you can expect federal agents to come and search your property. Is that in the future for farmers and ranchers under the mass deportation plan?
Sir, I have not been involved in that. The president's current plan, I cannot answer that one way or the other. I do know that my job is to ensure that as those conversations are ongoing, if confirmed, that I am part of that data collection and understanding, and that the president understands that what this means to our agriculture community. And I believe sincerely that he will execute his agenda that he has promised the American people, but that we'll never forget our ag community in so doing.
All right, that again from the confirmation hearing, Brooke Rollins for Agriculture Secretary. We do have to take a quick break and then we'll come back and discuss this. This is the AgNet News Hour. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halvorson.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. We are talking about the confirmation hearing, Brooke Rollins for Ag Secretary, and she was just discussing deportations. And, not a lot of commitment in that. I don't know what she could possibly commit to as far as that conversation at this point. But what were your feelings on it, Lorrie?
Well, I totally agree. I was going to say along the same lines is those questions are hard. I'm glad they're being brought up. They need to be brought up, especially in a big time hearing like that, where there are a lot of eyes and ears are on those hearings and everybody's really monitoring that. But she can't possibly expect to know, or they can't possibly expect to know all the answers right now. They still have a lot of work to go to get people confirmed and into their positions. They still have a lot of work to do with Congress and looking at things. I don't know how I think she did the best she could in answering those. Those were very difficult and complex questions that rely on a lot of other factors besides Brooke Rollins sitting in as USDA Secretary of Agriculture. But a couple of things that I want to mention here today is she is not the first and won't be the last secretary to talk about modernizing and updating the H-2A program. This conversation has been around almost as long as I've been a farm broadcaster.
Yeah.
And every year when I interview people from the dairy industry and USDA, it comes up over and over again. So let's put some teeth into this. Let's walk the walk and get something done. And let's get something that is good for everyone. These discussions have been going on for so long. You would think that there's been a lot of think tanks in progress that we can pull from to put the information together, all the smart people that are working on this, and actually put something together and get it done. I think that that would help alleviate a lot of this complex problem that we're talking about, which is almost what is the lesser of two evils? You've got undocumented workers working for you. I don't know if all the farmers know they're undocumented or not, but when you hire someone, I have to give my social security number, my driver's license. Are they given fake ones? I know that's a thing. Let's be real. We know that's a thing. But then, so if you're hiring people and not vetting them properly or hiring undocumented, I mean, already you're doing something wrong. And then how do you tell who's nefarious? Who are the criminals versus who are not the criminals? Now, that question, I've thought about that a lot actually here. That's hard. It's complex. I understand that. But in this day and age, when you can know exactly where I'm sitting and what I'm doing and what I'm talking about and what I'm interested in, I would think it wouldn't be too hard to figure out who exactly is doing the bad things.
Yes, you bring up many good points. And because we're not living in, we're in the internet age here. There's information at our fingertips at all times. It is not too hard to run a background check. As just in my everyday life, I am so good at running background checks just by doing internet searches. Police reports are public. So If somebody's charged with a crime here in the United States, it shouldn't be too hard to find it. Um, I don't know, I have a lot of questions about, we talk about the farmer being the employer, but actually most of the times, or in many of the times, there's a labor contractor who's kind of the in-between person between the worker and the farmer. That labor contractor is actually the person who's responsible for the hiring, for the background checks, for making sure people have their documentation. And however, if something goes wrong, if people are arrested or if there's not labor, it's the farmer who struggles. So that's an interesting dynamic that does not necessarily work in the farmer's favor either. And plus, then farmers are blamed for hiring illegal immigrants when they probably don't even know because it's not their space. It's their work contractor who is doing the hiring. And of course, you want to hire a work contractor that's, legit, but sometimes things fall through the cracks.
And yeah, well, I was speaking to how the farmer is usually the ones that get blamed, but you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. I'm glad you brought that up, and I should have brought that up as well. That in the end of the day, it's actually the labor contractor that is, in my opinion, or from what I understand anyway, and I admittedly don't understand all the little logistics that go into this. They're the ones that are kind of at fault, not the farmer. But to your point, when I mentioned that the farmers has undocumented workers, they don't always know, and it's not
Yeah.
they're the ones that get in trouble and they're the ones that get in the headlines, but it's not usually their fault.
Right. They're not the ones actually you're absolutely right. They're not the ones doing the actual hiring. They're just the ones that pay the bills and have the employees, and they're the ones who get called out. We do have to take another break, but we'll continue talking about this when we get back. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. She's Lorrie Boyer. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halvorson.
We're talking this morning about the confirmation hearing for the president's pick for Ag Secretary Brooke Rollins. We were talking about immigration and illegal immigrants and or undocumented immigrants, excuse me, and the whole deportation scenario that's going on. And her response to the question that we played, again, a little bit non-committal, but like we were pointing out, how much can she actually commit to at this point?
Yes, exactly. I mean, there's a lot. It's not just the Brooke Rollins making all the decisions and making all the changes. As we know,
Right.
there's lots of hurdles and lots of politics and lots of stuff that goes into making those decisions. And she needs a lot of support in making those decisions and a lot of input. I also wanted to say something else on when he was talking about, Durbin was talking about, do we need to warn farmers and ranchers of mass deportation? I thought that was interesting. Yeah, if I'm a farmer rancher and I have workers out of my dairy or in my orchard, I'm already going to be thinking of that, that could
Yeah.
happen at any time. And so, warning them, hopefully they don't have their heads in the sand and they know that this is coming and there's deportation. They're going to get with their labor contractor, like you said, and make sure that they are on the up and up. And in visiting with one here recently, this gentleman farmer said he's a specialty crop grower. He said, well, I'm doing everything right on my end, so I'm not
Right.
worried. I thought that was a great response. And then one other thing I wanted to add on my comment about trying to figure out who the criminal undocumented workers are among the undocumented workers.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it would be too hard to find that. But then after I said that, I got to thinking about the fact that I'm not smart enough to be a criminal because I don't know how to go under the radar. I don't know how to work the system. I don't even know what all the
That's true.
underground rules are of the system. The people that are criminals, they're going to know all that. They're a lot smarter than us honest people.
That's a sad fact, but it's true. But it's true.
So after I said, it's not too hard to find a person, I got to thinking about the people who know what they're doing in criminal activity probably are a lot harder to find than I'm just being maybe a little naive on that. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point because, I don't know. I get nervous if I run an orange light, not even a red one, but, an orange one. So, yeah, I get that. Is it an orange light or a yellow light? Either way, but yellow maybe, but but
Sabrina,
yeah,
you're scaring me.
this is why nobody rides with me. But anyway, you're right. It can be harder than we think. There's probably a lot that we don't know about, um, you know, hiding from staying under the radar if you are a criminal who is trying to get some work. And there are, I think, a lot of I mean, honestly, if I'm trying to not be naive, I will recognize that there are people who will hire these people for cash because it's easy work. It's an easy way to get a worker to do whatever needs to be done, whether not even necessarily in ag, whether it's in ag or construction or, any of these other industries where you can get paid daily, which can still be the case in many situations. So, as much as we like to think that things have progressed and everything is handled on the up and up, that may not necessarily be the case.
And that's a good point. So you got kind of two sides of nefarious going on in a lot of these situations. It did floor me. I didn't know that statistic that Durbin brought up. 40% of the ag workers or migrant workers are undocumented. That's almost half. I did not know the number was that high.
Yeah, I didn't either. And, maybe we should spend a little time fact checking on that. And how would you know if that's true, that
Yeah,
40%?
how would you know? You know what?
Because if
That's a
they're
whole nother point.
undocumented,
That's
right.
a whole nother, that's a really good point. I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah. Huh.
Yes, I'm going to work on fact checking that and we'll see what we come up with. But, but honestly, yes, there is a large number of agricultural workers who are undocumented. And that's just, we know that. We accept that. The fact that the president and his supporters keep saying we're just going after criminals, that kind of feels like it makes it better. The, in practical use, however, that's not necessarily the way it's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it stems back to the H-2A program and making sure that's on the up and up and modernized. I think that's
Yeah.
probably where it starts.
Yeah.
Those labor contractors that you talked about are included in that. So making sure all those things are on the up and up. I think these are very important to address this issue. I don't think anyone would deny that. It is an ongoing issue, has been for a long time. And as President Trump has pointed out, and I know that others have also mentioned this over the years, even during a Democratic administration, that a lot of times the fentanyl and the drugs and some of the human trafficking that come into our United States are coming in via the undocumented workers in the name of them being workers, whether it's in agriculture or the hotel or the construction industry.
Yeah.
So in my thought, and so that's kind of what I'm gathering too from what Rollins is saying, at least what she can say right now, is that will be one of her priorities. She's got a lot of priorities though. So then when it comes to priority of the priorities, I think that's part of the problem too, is that yes, it's important. Nobody's going to disagree with that. It's been at the top of the top 10, maybe. I'm just putting that out there. That's nobody's told me that. This is my own thought process. Top 10. And then as you get into session and things go on and all these things pop up like wildfires, bird flu, FMD, all these things that pop up over the time that you're in office, all of a sudden that H2A goes lower and lower and lower. And I believe
Yeah.
that's true.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that that's been the problem for many years. Like you said, you've been reporting on this your entire career. I've been reporting on this for as long as I've been in Ag News, which I did my first H2A story in 2012, which was the year I started in Ag News. I was in General News before that. So, yeah. And then for you, it's been 20 some years of reporting on this and still no solution. So, we do need to take another break. We'll continue chatting when we get back. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. She's Lorrie Boyer. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halvorson.
We're talking this morning about the confirmation hearing for Brooke Rollins, who is the president's pick for Ag Secretary. And we've talked about trade, we've talked about illegal immigration, and there are a couple of other issues that, again, non-committal is kind of the word that's being thrown around. One of them being SNAP, so nutrition assistance. Again, when she was asked specifically about SNAP and adding a work requirement, it was another answer that I don't have her exact words, but it was another answer that she needed to basically study the program more before she could give an opinion on the matter, which I appreciate. I completely understand. And it's actually a very appropriate answer, I think, at this stage. How can she possibly have researched everything? But the SNAP program is so extremely important to many of our the people around the nation, and in California, we do have a large population on SNAP. And that brings with it a lot of questions about, are we using this program appropriately? And I think that's also a big focus with this administration, especially with, as we know, with funding and things. Is this money being handled appropriately?
I was just going to say that. That is one of the things that has been brought up as you and I talked about the recent brief freeze of federal loans and grants. That program specifically was brought up multiple times by different lawmakers across the United States and across the board and what their backgrounds are in. That's very important. And as we know, only a small percentage, I want to say 1 or 2%, a very low percentage of the farm bill is actually farm. And that over
Right.
the years of reporting, it's been brought up almost all the time is, why do we call it the farm bill? It stays the farm bill, but it's actually mostly made up of social programs like SNAP. And so it's a very big part of what goes on in there. And, you think of a USDA Secretary of Ag and they oversee that. What qualifications this person has to have to be in this, because they have to know about the ins and outs of farming. And then they need to turn around and know the ins and outs of how community culture and social welfare work. It's a very daunting job, not to mention forestry and all the other things that go into this job.
Yeah, there is so much under the umbrella of the U.S. Department of Agriculture that, yeah, you're right. Just the qualifications and what you need to know, which would be another reason why it's important to have good undersecretaries as well for each of these different departments, because one person can't possibly be an expert in all of these different areas.
Exactly. And that was kind of the bottom line report, or bottom line point, is you do need good leadership. And I think that's where Trump is questioning why some of these leaders have made the decision that they've made, including undersecretaries, including some of the lower line USDA people, because there has been a lot of mismanagement of funds.
Hmm. Yeah, so it'll be really interesting to see how things progress. And I know that there's been some changes already in undersecretaries, and that those will make a big difference. And in dealing again with the nutrition programs, very, very important programs, but it's also very important that we get it right. And maybe it is time to look at some of these things a little bit more closely, in all of our programs, because we need to reevaluate things, and that's just good common sense. Every few years, reevaluate the programs that you've had and make sure that they're working for the people they're supposed to be working for.
Exactly. And I think that's what the premise behind some of these things that Trump is doing on reevaluating programs and reevaluating the people that are in charge. And while I haven't seen this wording directly, I'm assuming that the president has charged each of his department heads, to go through things with a fine-tooth comb.
Yeah, and that seems to be the directive that has been coming out again and again, is look more closely at these things. And so, again, we're nonpartisan here, and on this program, we simply look out for agriculture and kind of try to translate what's going on and how it affects agriculture. So it's another one of these things that we'll just continue to watch as things continue to progress. But we are out of time for today. So we'll continue just taking a look and keeping you updated on future shows. So this has been the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. She is Lorrie Boyer. Thank you for sharing your morning with us.
To get more information on the topics you heard today, visit AgNet West at agnetwest.com. You can also stay connected by following us on our social media at AgNet West on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Also look for Sabrina Halvorson on Facebook, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast by searching for AgNet West on your podcast app. Thank you for listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. AgNet West Radio Network, your primary choice for agriculture news.